Salvete viatores, and welcome back to Let's Translate Eutropius's Breviarium Historiae Romanae ab Orbe Condita. Last time we translated the first chapter detailing a description of Romulus, the founder and first king of Rome, without any of the fratricide involved, and a date for when Rome was founded. This time, we begin Condita Civitate, the city having been founded. And so, that's the literal translation, at least. This is what's called an ablative absolute. And I'll explain more in detail later, since we are actually going to be seeing a few ablative absolutes. But for now, I'm just going to translate that. I'm going to translate this as when. Actually, I think it does make more sense to have it after the city was founded. And then quam ex nomine sua Roma vocavit. That is a relative clause, as we can tell through the QU word at the beginning, quam, that relative pronoun. Vocavit is our verb, Romam is our object, ex nomine suo is a prepositional phrase. So, which, referring to Civitate, the city. So the city which he called, and he, here, is still Romulus, because there's no subject explicitly stated in this clause or in the whole sentence. So we do basically the same thing we did in that first relative clause in the last chapter. We just take the last subject stated and use it again. And since the last subject stated is Romulus in the last chapter, we're just going to continue on with Romulus as our subject. So, he, Romulus, called Rome from his own name. And haec fere egit. Fere we've seen before, and in that situation, it was translated as scarcely. However, here, this is not a negative clause, so we'd translate it means here more about, generally, approximately, any of those kind of unsure kinds of words. So Romulus did, about these things. Generally these things. Also verb and our object. So, after the city was founded, which he called Rome from his own name, he did generally these things. Multitudinem finitimorum in civitatem recipit. So recipit is our verb. In civitatem, we've got a prepositional phrase. And multitudinem is our object, as finitimorum is in the genitive, modifying multitudinem. So, he received many of the neighbors or neighboring peoples. Finitimus comes from the word finis for border or end, even. So this is basically just people outside of, I would presume, the border of the territory that he basically claimed for the city of Rome. In civitatem, into the city. Or maybe it's just the border of the city itself. Probably that, since you kind of need to populate a city. Centum ex senioribus legit. He chose 100 from the elders, or ex could also be translated as out of, so it could be 100 from the elders or 100 out of the elders. Out of actually kind of sounds better here. We've got quorum, another relative clause, and that goes, thank you, punctuation, But also we've got another relative clause starting right after that, so it's pretty clear where this relative clause ends. Though you could also tell where a relative clause ends because the verb generally is the last thing stated in a sentence in Latin. Or not even a sentence, but just like a clause, an idea for the sentence. We've got omnia. Omnia, if you didn't really know, like at first glance, it's like, oh, that could be ablative. But no, omnia from omnis, omnia can only be neuter. Omnia can only be neuter and nominative or accusative plural. So this has to be our object. Unless you want to say that all things did whatever, which doesn't really make any sense here. So it's Romulus doing all things. Quorum concilio. Quorum, relative pronouns in a relative clause still do the function that their case shows. So quorum is in the genitive plural, still modifying. And so it's modifying concilio for possession. And concilio is like a plan, advice, or even if you want it to sound a bit fancy, counsel. So this is by, because this is ablative of means, I believe, by whose, or by their, it's more like whose, since it is relative clause, counsel, by whose counsel, he did everything. Who, quos senatores nomina vit propter senectutem, nomina vit is our verb, senatores is our object, and propter senectutem is a prepositional phrase, so quos, who, nomina vit, he named senatores, or just senators, on account of their old age. So, if you didn't know this before, the word senator literally comes from just old men. They are old men in like a position of power, basically. And I think the word senator, having its origins in just being old men, or even, it doesn't even specify men, but just old people, it's rather fitting for at least the US legislative system right now. Anyways, so that's the end of the sentence. Let's go over that real quick. So he, Romulus, received many of the neighbors into the city. He chose 100 of the elders, or elderly, I suppose, by whose advice he did everything, who he named senators on account of their old age. Now, honestly, when translating, I think it sounds better to have the second relative clause with quos senatores before the one with quorum concilio. I think it just flows better to have it. He chose 100 out of the elders whom he named senators on account of their old age, by whose counsel he did everything. I think that just flows a bit better. But if you think otherwise, then I cannot blame you, as that's the order that it is written in. So, moving on. Tum, cum uxores ipse et populus suus non haberent. Tum is then. Cum is, as we saw last time, cum can work either as a conjunction or a preposition. It's generally how you can tell at a glance at least if cum is a preposition or conjunction is look for the words right after and see if there's an ablative soon after, since the preposition cum takes an ablative with it. Prepositions always take a specific case. And since we have uxores and ipse, that's accusative, that's nominative. It's cum is just the conjunction here. So when he himself and his own people non haberent, also these are our subjects. We've got two subjects here. Also sus, I think you would say it modifies populus. But when he himself and his own people did not have uxores, wives. And if you know this story, you know where this is going. Invitavit ad spectaculum laudorum, vicinas urbi Romae nationes, atque erarum virginis rapuit. So we've got a preposition in ad spectaculum. You can include ludorum in spectaculum, I think, in the prepositional phrase, I think, since ludorum is modifying spectaculum through its possession, since it's genitive plural. But I don't know. My way of marking up, since it's not in between the words, I won't do that. But if a word is modifying the main part of the prepositional phrase, then I guess I could put the parenthesis around it. But anyways, more marking up. Invitavit is our verb. Vicinas nationes. Nationes is the main object. Vicinas is an adjective modifying nationes. Rapuit. Well, we'll stop here since atque is a conjunction, beginning another phrase. Romae is in the genitive, modifying orbi. Yeah, so invitavit, he, back to the singular subject. So we're back to Romulus as the subject. He invited vicinas nationes, neighboring nations, or I hesitate to say nations, even though we get the word nation from nationes. It's more peoples. I mean, you can say nations technically, but I think of nations in the sense of a nation state, which did not exist at this time. That came about way later in the 19th century. So I'd rather say peoples. And then orbi is in the dative, so it's acting as the indirect object to the city of Rome. He invited the neighboring peoples to the city of Rome, ad spectaculum ludorum, to a spectacle of games. Actually, I just realized, ad can also, I usually think of ad at first as to, like going to a place, but it can actually be used as for, showing more of a purpose. So it's probably better to translate it as for a spectacle of games. And then atque earum virginis rapuit. Rapuit is our verb, virginis is our object, earum is genitive, modifying virginis. And he kidnapped their virgins, or maidens, either one. Now, rapuit, you can translate it as rape, but it's more like kidnapping or snatching. It's not necessarily how we generally think of as rape, even if the story that is being told here, where Romulus invites the peoples around to games and then kidnaps their maidens to take as wives for all of his people and himself. It's generally called the rape of the Sabine woman, and it's a similar case to the rape of Persephone, that mythological story. It's more it's more akin to kidnapping. That particular word, at least. Now we come to Comotis Bellis, and with this, the second appearance of the ablative absolute. And it's a short sentence. I will go ahead and explain more what the ablative absolute is. So, when you have a participle and a noun, both in the ablative, as well as matching in gender and number, then you get what is called an ablative absolute. It's sort of independent of the rest of the sentence and is most literally translated as the thing having been whatevered. So in Conte da Civitate's case, the most literal translation is the city having been founded, the wars having been provoked. Though a lot of students generally use that as a crutch, like using that most literal translation every time they come across the ablative, it's much better to translate it slightly differently depending on the context, since it could be used in that way. So how I did after the city was founded, instead of the city having been founded, or when the city having been founded. Or I guess more just when the city was founded is a possible translation for that. Like when the wars were provoked or after the wars were provoked also works. And honestly, after the wars were provoked probably works the best here anyways. So, Comotis Bellis, when after the wars were provoked, or when the wars were provoked actually works here too. There's a lot of choice in how you translate the ablative absolute. It's not something that I particularly enjoy because I sort of get deer in the headlight syndrome when I get a ton of choices presented at me for pretty much anything. But for someone more creative, it ought to be very enjoyable to be like, oh, ablative absolute. Let me see how I can translate this the best I can. But anyways, we've got a prepositional phrase with propter raptarum melioriam. Cainenses wicked, our verb. Cainenses is in the accusative plural. And so is antemnates, crustumenos, sabenos, fidenates, and veantes. All these are our object. They are all the object. But first, when the wars were provoked, on account of the offense, or you could say injury, since we get the word injury from here, but I think offense works better. On account of, or even because, of the offense of the kidnappings, he, still Romulus, defeated or conquered the Cainenses, the Antemnates, the Crustumenos, the Sabenos or Sabines, the Fidenates, and the Veantes. Oh, and in fact, I just realized something. So there's this little... There's this phrase that you probably will learn in poetry when you're studying poetry. There are two called polysyndeton and asyndeton. Polysyndeton is when you... in a list, you have and after each one. So here it would be, he defeated the Cainenses, and the Antemnates, and the Crustumenos, and the Sabinos. Whereas here, it's just, he defeated the Cainenses, the Antemnates, the Crustumenos, the Sabinos. They serve different purposes. And give a different feel for those, for a list. Or, you could just have the and right before the last in the sentence, in the list. But yeah, polysyndeton and asyndeton. They're neat. But yeah, this sentence, going over the whole thing. After the wars were provoked on account of the offense of the kidnappings, he conquered well, not conquered, because he didn't actually take their territory. He defeated the Cainenenses, the Antemnates, the Crustuminos, the Sabinos, the Fedenates, the Veantes. Haec omnia opera orbem cingunt. So we've got a verb in cingunt. Haec omnia opera as a whole is the subject. I'm not completely sure how to mark this up. So omnia, I'm sure, is an adjective, so that's modifying opera. Haec is a pronoun. I suppose it's also modifying opera. Because it's all these towns or even cities, oppidum usually refers to, like, oppidum is often used for a city that is not Rome, as opposed to orbem or orbs. That's just city, but it's used in place of the city of Rome. It's meant to mean Rome. So this little sentence is all these towns. Actually, I think Kingwood is. Yeah, it's present. It's present. So he's saying that those towns currently surround Orbem, Rome? So I already had a thing to talk about here, and now I'm like even more confused on what Eutropius is thinking. In fact, let me just show you. Alright, so this is a map of ancient Italy with a bunch of ancient peoples and ancient cities shown on here. And I just wanted to give you some perspective on where all of these places were in relation to Rome. So, we have Rome right here, on the Tiber, of course, in the area that the Latins lived in. And then we've got the Antemnates right here. We've got the Fidenates right here as well. Both of those are north of the city. Then the Crustuminos are right here in Crustumerium. I kind of blocked it there. Crustumerium. And the Sabines, the Sabini, they just sort of live in this area, not all focused on one city. And then we've got the Veantes in Veii or Veii. They're a major Etruscan city. Now, there is one name that is missing from here, but you could already probably see my point. But the Cainenenses are not on here because we don't know exactly where their city of Cainina actually is or even was. The scholars think that it's probably somewhere on the Anio River, but we're not exactly sure. I'm not a scholar, but scholars and archaeologists are not completely sure where it is. But still, my point is, these cities are not surrounding Rome. In no way can these cities be considered surrounding Rome. I thought maybe it could be that their armies came together to surround Rome in a sort of siege, but that idea is completely just blown away by the Kingunt being in the present tense, meaning that in Eutropius' time, they surround Rome. But I don't know what he actually means by that, if these cities and all these peoples are all north of Rome. None of them are even south of the Anio River. Except maybe Cainina, if we ever knew where they were. I don't understand why he said that. Maybe someone in the comments can explain it to me. I don't know. But I just I'm just, for some reason, very fixated on this and quite dumbfounded. But anyways, let's continue on from geographical confusion. Et cum orta subito tempestate non compara viset. And when, and yes, this is when, cum is being used as a conjunction, though orta, right after it, is ablative and is an adjective modifying tempestate. In fact, it's not even an adjective, it's a participle. This is an ablative absolute. This is the next ablative absolute. In fact, technically, I should have the modification arrows right there, I think. So, orta tempestate is an ablative absolute. And if you don't quite pay attention to that, you can fall into the trap of, oh, cum followed by ablative is always the preposition, even though it is not. So it's a general rule to follow, but it's not perfect. Subito, on the other hand, is nice and simple. It's an adverb, meaning suddenly. Compara viset is our verb. So, et cum and when. I think you could have either orta subito tempestate first or non compara viset first. I don't think it makes that big of a difference in the translation, at least not from what I can tell. So non compara viset is he was not present. So, and when he was not present, orta tempestate orta subito tempestate. I would say after a storm appeared suddenly, since like he wasn't there after the storm left, is my thinking. And I don't know if it's better and when after a storm suddenly appeared, or after a storm suddenly appeared, he was not present, or he was not present after a storm suddenly appeared. I don't know which one really sounds better. So, do with that what you will. I'll probably, when doing an English reading near the end, I'll probably just have it, the word order that's here. But, anno regni tricesimo septimo ad Deus transisse creditus est et consecratus. So we're back to ablative of time when. In his 37th year of reign, or of rule, ad Deus is a prepositional phrase. Transisse is technically a verb, but it's not like, it's in the infinitive. So we don't mark it as like a main verb. Creditus est. It is believed. So in his 37th year of rule, it is believed he, or more so, since that's an infinitive, it's more like he is believed to have passed to the gods. If you want to, I feel like that's a better translation for transisse, but the way I've heard this story before is that the Romans believed that Romulus, when he didn't appear after a sudden storm, he became a god. It was believed that he became a god, et consecratus, and he was consecrated, or maybe you'd even say deified. But you could also interpret it that passing over to the gods could also be that he just died. But if it's to the gods, and by gods, that probably means like Olympus, like the Olympic gods, then, that he wouldn't be dead then, right? I don't know. But this whole sentence, and when, after a storm suddenly appeared, he was not present in his 37th year of rule. He is believed to have passed over to the gods and was consecrated. Deinde Romae per quinos dies senatores imperauerunt, et his regnantibus annus unus completus est. So deinde is just a conjunction meaning then or afterwards. Romae is actually in the dative and not the genitive. And that actually, imperauerunt, that actually certain verbs can take a specific case that is not the accusative as its object, and impero is one of those where it takes the dative as its object. So we finally have a stated subject in senatores, since Romulus is gone. So the senators ruled Rome. Roma is actually our object here. Per quinos dies. And that's like every 5 days or something like that through 5 days. It's weird. It only gets a little weirder afterwards, where his regnantibus. So his regnantibus is like under these rules, under these reigns, 1 year is completed. So I honestly somewhat struggle to understand exactly what Eutropius means. I think it's that the senators each took turns ruling, each turn lasting 5 days, and at the end of it, a whole year had passed. I think that's what it is. I thought maybe it's just that the senators, as a collective, ruled Rome for 5 days, and then... And after those 5 days, a new king was chosen. But no, I don't think so. His regnantibus being plural suggests more that the senators were all taking turns and each had their own little bit of a reign. I don't know. This last sentence is weird to me. It's a weird idea. Weird. It's just weird. But that's the whole paragraph, the whole chapter. So, just like last time, I will do a reading in Latin and then a reading in English to end this off. Condita civitate, quam ex nomine suo Romam vocavit, haec fere egit. Multitudinem finitimorum in civitatem recipit, centum ex senioribus legit, quorum concilio omnia agaret, quos senatores nominavit propter senectutem. Tum, cum uxores ipse et populus suus non haberent, invitavit ad spectaculum ludorum vicinas urbi Romae nationes, atque earum virgines rapuit. Commotis bellis propter raptarum ignoriam, cainenenses vigit, antemnates crustuminos, sabinos, fidenates veantes. Haec omnia opera orbem cingunt. Et cum orta subitut tempestate non comparuisset, anno regni 37, ad Deos transisse creditus est, et consecratus. Deinde Romae per quinos dies senatores imperauerunt, et his regnantibus annus unus completus est. After the city, which he named Rome from his own name, was founded, he did generally these things. He received many of the neighbors into the city, he chose 100 out of the elders, whom he named senators on account of their old age, by whose counsel he did everything. Then, when he himself and his own people did not have wives, he invited the neighboring peoples to the city of Rome for a spectacle of games, and kidnapped their maidens. After the wars were provoked due to the offense of the kidnappings, he defeated the Cainenenses, the Antemnates, the Creustuminos, the Sabines, the Fidenates, and the Veantes. All these towns surrounded the city, and when, after a storm suddenly appeared, he was not present, in the 37th year of his rule, he was believed to have passed over to the gods and was consecrated. Afterwards, the senators ruled Rome for 5 days each, and under these reigns, 1 year was completed. Until next time, where we read 2 shorter chapters to gain a glimpse into the second and third kings of Rome, Numa Pompilius and Tullus Hostilius. Valete, Viatores.